everyone, and welcome to my first day in tech, the Careerist podcast, where we discuss careers in tech industry, AI, and education. We are your hosts with 20 years of product and creative design. I'm Andrew Riddle, and with me, your favorite UX researcher, Kamitha Dunn. Hi, Kamitha.
Hey, everybody.
Hi, Kamitha. So last week we had a really good conversation about networking and volunteering and finding like-minded individuals, and we were asked if we could talk a little bit more about that. Some of the resources that we use to stay on top of things, and some more of the professional networks. And I'm curious to know, as a UX researcher, who do you what industry standards, where are you getting your information from? Who do you like to follow?
All right, so this is all right, so here's my answer. I use Reddit quite a bit. Actually, wrote a couple things down. I got it on my other screen because I thought about it. I thought about it and I'm like, man, should I tell people that I use Reddit? But I do. Um, because there's just a lot of smart people around that are always looking for information and they're very good with uh giving their thoughts. So, Reddit is definitely one that I use quite a bit. I use a lot of LinkedIn newsletters. So, Zane, for example, on LinkedIn has an AI newsletter that I follow, which is pretty phenomenal to stay on top of, as well as the Copilot and Gemini stuff and all of that. There's also a number of newsletters that I am a part of, and I'm gonna pull the list over. I'll let you mention 1 or 2, but I'll pull the list over because actually it's only a couple, but I wrote them down. That's so I could look at you and talk to you at the same time. But those are the 2 for sure that are pretty much um, daily go-tos. Medium is also another, that I use that's very, very valuable to me for the opinions and the factual information, that's there, but that's just a couple,
Yeah,
that I use so far.
absolutely. And I'm kind of excited about this too because we're going to be plugging a lot of references, and I'm also just a research hound, so I like salivate at this stuff. Um, yeah, I think Medium is really wonderful. Reddit is an amazing community for anybody out there, especially if you are a young designer, you're newbie, what have you. When my students are looking to have people to survey, to have critique their work, A/B testing, whatever it is, the Reddit community always rises to the challenge. Always, always, always. I think it is a wonderful resource to have, and it's just Redditors are just they're just so involved, and I love that about it. And there's so many kind of there's everything, but the Reddit community for not just talking about trends and what's happening in the UI UX product design research world, but just conversation. Not that the internet is short of just open conversation, but Reddit especially. I feel like Reddit is excellent for having that for providing that Discord for sure. Um, I think, and you said LinkedIn as well. I'm really into
So
LinkedIn.
Reddit, the LinkedIn, I mean, they just have a plethora of things, whether it's a newsletter or forum. Medium was another one that I mentioned. And again, this is all about like insights and just putting your mind in the mindset that is necessary sometimes to come up with solutions and ideas. And then one more that's really valuable for me is Dribbble. I use Dribbble quite a bit for inspiration and ideas. And then, of course, as an instructor, you guys give me inspiration every day because you're always thinking of something that I just didn't think about. So,
Are the teacher awards coming out here soon? You just had to plug that. No, I agree. I learn a lot. I learn a lot from my students as well. And a Dribble is a great resource. It is a great inspirational resource. Um, the caveat of which I will say, as a product designer and looking at a lot of product design books, Dribbble often has work with no parameters. So, which is great. I mean, I get it, right? And there's opportunity to go out there and just see how far UI UX can go. Um, I do know a lot of times you'll see like product owners or product managers bring printouts from from Dribbble, and they'll just like, we should do this, and you're like, we can't do that. That's not a thing. That's not a thing at
That's
all.
true. Yeah.
And that also reminds me, as as far as networks and communities are concerned, and talk, the community that you work with, your devs, your product owners, have a conversation with them and brainstorm. There are things that, as a designer, you may not think about, that architecture may think of, or you may not think about, that dev has. Um, and sometimes we want to push boundaries and we want to utilize some trends. The bottom line always, though, is that we work for the user. So those are the people who really control what we do. That being said, don't limit yourself, don't limit your possibility. It's always good to see how far you can go. I feel like, there's always people out there who will say no, so you just kind of, go all in for sure.
Yeah, I agree completely, and there's also a couple of platforms that I've used to in a sense, reskill myself, but also to keep some of my skills valid. So, what I mean by that is, as your favorite researcher, my main responsibility is gathering, extrapolating insights from user data and really getting a better understanding of what the user's needs, wants, that whole spiel that we do, needs, wants, and desires from the user, right?
Yeah, yeah,
And
absolutely.
so having certain avenues such as YouTube University, right? That's a go-to, of course.
Hmm.
Udemy, a Udemy, depending on how you pronounce it. Interaction Design Foundation for me specifically, has been very beneficial to keep my design skills up. I even do some of the Figma community things that they have there. Again, it's very important to stay on top of wireframing and stay on top of the new trends and the new buttons and the new international um, uh, i- commonalities of colors and buttons and things like that. So those are some things that I do from a design perspective that's really important for me because I am not actually designing on a daily basis. But if the opportunity presents itself, or whatever the case may be, your favorite researcher will be prepared. So it's been really beneficial to stay on top. And those are a couple of more like name drops, if you will. There's so many out there, but those are ones that I use on a more regular basis that I can speak to.
Yeah, I agree. And keeping honing those skills, especially when we have so many resources for some, to keep up, AI, we talk about that quite a bit. Google has a AI for educators run through. I think it's about 10 hours, something like that. Um, Very valuable to have out there. There's hardly an excuse to not hone your skills on those things, but staying sharp in them, staying on top of those Figma skills, those are very important. That's something that I tend to lean more towards, kind of that leadership management. And then that sometimes my designers will be like, oh, we'll just do this with Figma. And I'm like, yeah. And then I'm just like going to Google that. I'm going to watch some YouTube videos. And then I'm like, okay, I know how to jump in there. Because it is just rapidly changing. And I think that's kind of what the important things about these organizations and these groups and newsletters is staying in the loop. There's a lot of conversations happening, and there's not always, there's not one way to go about it, but standards are changing. Trends come and go, standards also come and go. New technology comes in and out. We talked about that, and I think maybe our last podcast, what causes technology trends. And
Yeah,
as the internet of things are adjusting, whether it be on a watch or on the wall or in your vacuum cleaner, so too do the standards of what we're
that's
expected
true.
to provide and what our users are asking for, right? Our
Yeah.
our vehicles, our avenues that we're designing for. um, I use that very long monologue to pull up my LinkedIn to see what groups I'm in. And it's very much the same. I have my
Oh, the artificial intelligence, we're a part of that together. That's a LinkedIn community. It's like 50, 60,000 people in there. Love
yes.
that community.
We are always there to thumbs up each other's posts for that. Um, there's ChatGPT in general, prompts, insights, recruitment, but there's a lot of stuff like the user experience, design, agile UX. I think is very important. Not just talking about how do we go through and improve user experience, but doing it in an agile way, and keeping up to date on that methodology, which is not just good for you as a designer, but it's great for your users and it's great for your team. On top of which, I do follow things like Future of Education, technology conferences, um, the UX professionals, that type of, just to kind of get a glimpse on what people are talking about. Um, there's a lot of kind of right and wrong debate on, oh, should we use labels and iconography together? Are they interchangeable? Can you change one out? Are we technologically advanced so much that we don't need to have the same kind of um, symbolic lexicon? What am I trying to say here? Um, Clarity that we used to have. And that does come up a lot. But at the same time, it's sometimes people are bringing up questions that you haven't thought to ask in a long time, and those answers are not always as relevant as they were 2, 3, 5, 10, 15 years ago. And I think that's another really important thing about having these in. How active you want to be in these groups is, I would say, entirely up to you. Generally speaking, we don't get into so much comment wars on stuff like LinkedIn, but it does happen. But I like the reminder. I like to be reminded of what people are working on, especially when you find yourself in a position that's doing more management or project management, and the designers out there trying to figure out, well, how do you deal with this? How do you deal with that? And it's an opportunity to throw down your mentorship a little bit, to help someone out who's in the area that you were in a handful of years ago. Um, and everybody is somewhere where you were at some point. And as confusing and convoluted as that sound, they may be just interested in getting design or finding out about it. They might be getting their hands on Figma or Illustrator or whatever for the first time. And though you might feel it's passe, or that you're beyond it, you can help these people a lot. And so it's important to be out there and make friends and make those connections. And again, networking, you never know where that's going to go.
Meetup.com is another one. There's a plethora of meetups in every geographic location. That's another one. I think Corsica has some things that have been beneficial for me. edX, I can't say enough. I think edX is a phenomenal tool as well. When it comes to things like, you don't necessarily need coding, but if, hey, you want to make yourself valuable and know a little more, it gives you an opportunity to earn some things. So, or even if you don't finish it, there's no pressure, but you get introduced to it. So I wanted to do a couple of name drops, because again, I'm putting myself in the position of, hey, I'm new at this, or newer, or I've been in this same job for 10 years, and now I have to go back and realize that I wasn't paid industry standard, because that always happens, right?
Always
And
happens.
then there's a whole plethora of information that I simply wasn't exposed to. I'll give you
Mhm.
one more thing that's worked for me. For Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, which is unhinged, right? You wanna get some honest opinions, but go to those social medias and start Googling things like, maybe groups that work there. So, like Walmart FTEs, full-time employees, and you'll be surprised with some of the groups that you can get in and really get some good ideas of the organization itself, some things, expectations that they have, some things to expect. Those have been very, very beneficial for me through the years, and even in the interview process, because again, there's some unspoken things that you just will never know unless you know someone in the organization. So, I guess a couple more things that I thought about that I kinda wrote down that I wanted to put out there. So, go to search and start typing in. You'll be surprised. Now, no guarantees are gonna, let you enter the group, but you never know, right? So,
If you don't ask, the answer is always no. And
your
that's
mouth
interesting too.
doesn't get fed.
I hadn't thought about that in a while, but so I used to work for American Airlines, and just Googling stuff like aviation technology and aviation, that kind of thing, and you'll come across, oh, sign up for a free demo, and okay, and then you're just in this class with all of these tech people from airlines around the world, and just stumbling up, so just crawl around the internet and see what you can kind of get in trouble for. And there's a whole lot out there, which that's not a surprise to anybody. It is the internet, but there's a lot more than just kind of your LinkedIn and Facebook and Reddit. And really, you want to be as close to the source as possible. And I think that's really the best way of doing it. So if you come across a designer, an insider, YouTube content creator, whatever it may be that you really like, make sure that you're following them. If we're one of them, make sure you follow us as well. I don't know, maybe we bring something special to your life. You had mentioned edX. Is that I looked? I saw that edX is that through Harvard and MIT. Is that their collaboration?
So there's maybe 15 or 20 schools and organizations that collaborate. So IBM is in there, Cambridge is in there, they're overseas. I mean, universities and organizations in China, which you think would not be beneficial until you realize how intertwined we are with our products. So when you're talking about, global scale, being able to appeal to your audience, it's a completely different phenomenon. That's really interesting and valuable to know if that's your niche in the design or research world. But basically, so yeah, you have don't quote me on Princeton because that might not be true, but University of Austin, Texas is in there. There's just a plethora of schools, and I didn't necessarily go in there for the certifications because I'm at a point now where um, I don't. I'm not gonna say I don't need it because that's not true, but it wasn't my number one focus. My number one focus was actually retaining the information and just being able to understand if I can understand the fundamentals of coding, not to code, but the fundamentals of it, then I can better communicate when we have a deadline or when something needs to be changed because it can be a big deal on their end. And once I understand that it's a big deal, I can be a little more empathetic and my conversation would be different. And as a result, I'll get what I want, and the organization will get what it needs in a timely manner. So I use it more so as a communication tool because, again, as your favorite researcher, um, I'm finding myself, and you guys are going to find yourself in that role too, regardless whether you're a product designer, a content creator, where you're going to be in the middle and you're going to have to be the communicator to make sure that all departments are on the same page and that the overall goal is completed or the overall design is executed. So for me at this stage of my career, because I'm at the mid getting to the senior level career, and Andrew, I think you can 100% attest with me on that. Communication has become the number one tool
Absolutely.
that I need to enhance in order to go to the next level because I mean, communication is how things get done. So
I,
I,
I
I have the technical expertise. I'm going to continue that, of course, but now it's about communicating.
I couldn't agree more. I think that's and skills are always changing. Figma won't always be here. It'll be something else. Maybe not. I don't know. But communication is so key. There are so many people. It's necessary to keep a product, to build a product, to keep it going. And we exist in this kind of spectrum gradient of not just being like, well, I'm a designer and then you're a researcher, so you research and I'll design and then we'll head on over. It's not siloed, and nor should it be. And usually, if you're in a siloed committee, that's a red flag. You want to make sure that everyone gets to the table. You hear words like round table or four in the box or five in the box or whatever it may be, and that means that you're having representatives from each group to confer about the product lifestyle or life cycle, what's best for the decisions, how we're going to contact our users about it. And in order to do that, right, like you were saying, you don't need to know. For me, I don't need to know how to code, but I do need to learn conversational code. I need to know enough about it where I can communicate with my dev and also communicate with my VP and being able to converse freely and openly in a way that we're translating everything equally. We can all be on the same page. Um, I do also project management. I've had some amazing project managers that I aspire to be to. I'm not to that level yet, but I can speak conversational project management, and that's important, right? And in these kinds of programs that we see on Google or YouTube or whatever, just I mean even videos, just go out there and jump around and understand a little bit of a lot of things. It is going to be helpful. The adage of you know jack of all trades, master of none. That is, we're going to scrap that. I never want to hear that again. We have to communicate in so many different languages at all times now. That is where we live. Our information is going so quickly that it is required. We cannot just be like, oh, this is all I do. Everyone's just going to have to deal with it. That is not where we live. I don't know if we'll ever go back to it. I suspect we will not. So be curious, jump in, watch some YouTube videos, read some course outlines, whatever it may be. Just hear what other people are talking about or what other people do or what other responsibilities are in the product cycle. find out what it is, just so you can at least keep up with the conversation, and you can bring a very interesting perspective to that. And I think that's another one of these the important things about just signing up for these groups or these newsletters on LinkedIn or what have you. One that I subscribe to that I love is Brookings Institute. It's a research institute. I don't bring everything that they publish to the table. That's just not where I live. But it it really hones a very interesting research skill. It hones a very sharp eye for true data versus obscure data by reading these very acute references. Another one is, of course, MIT, Harvard Business Review. All of those are all going to be high echelon, well achieving reference points. I'm down for like so and so posted this on LinkedIn and they're looking at UI. That's great. Information can get very skewed online. It is a huge game of telephone with millions and millions of people. So just like any other research, just like we did in high school, middle school, whatever, you want to get as close to the source as possible. Things will get obscure, and so maybe you don't want to read MIT review all the time, and I'm going to get hammered for that one. Excuse me. Um, but having that reference there, jumping into it every once in a while, being familiar with it, it'll help kind of it'll help keep an eye out for some of the less reputable resources that exist on the internet. Shock that anybody would put out something that wasn't true online. But that is, again, the world we live in. So I think that's another thing about those industry newsletters, professional networks. White papers are another great one. I just read for fun. Anything that has to do with, finance or aviation, because those are the areas I've worked in, education. I also read a white paper that is just on amusement parks because I find it interesting. And that is just the business newsletters of what is happening in the industry of whatever. These are all very close to the source, very close to the subject references that just you can Google, you can look on there. If you have a curious mind, go out there and find them, and they will really help you kind of develop different perspectives about how you solve problems.
I love that. And it's so funny that you mentioned that phrase about a jack of all trades, because no one ever talks about the entire phrase. And it says, a jack of all trades is a master of none, but oftentimes better than a master of one. Right. So we don't want you to necessarily be a jack of all trades and know a little bit about everything. However, based off of Shakespeare's quote, it is better than just being a person who only knows one thing. So let's put that whole phrase in perspective. A jack of all trades is a master of none, but oftentimes better than a master of one. And we need to put stuff in context, right?
Whew, I just feel just let that one sit. I'm just gonna let that one chill
I
over here. That's
know.
yeah.
Shakespeare
And
had it
that's
right. I'll tell you
uh,
that.
look at that one more time. Um, Agreed, right? Just like we were saying, we have to be conversationally fluent in different languages. We have to be able to speak in dev. We have to be able to speak in management. We have to understand, why is it that, who knows, higher ups might be making these decisions, and those things are important for us to know in the life of business, in the life of product. I think just life in general, it's important for us to understand where people are coming from and how to communicate with them on their level. It's not something that we're always good at, but it's something that we should always practice to do.
I agree completely. And I know we're talking about, or we'll also talk about like conferences and webinars. And I get this question a lot like, man, how did you get to the NVIDIA conference, for example? Or how do you get exposed to these things? And it's a two-edged sword. It's first being a part of organizations that introduce you to information that you may not otherwise know. Or there's people who work at different companies that have different things going on that maybe you would not know about otherwise. So that was my first avenue. The second leg of that, though, is literally Googling things like, what are the conferences, UX, UI conferences of 2024? What are the dev conferences or what are the generative AI conferences in 2024 in your state or in your city? Or for me, I just do the whole nation because, hey, why not? Right. And it just allows me to either be a part of it, either start talking about it, either, click on the newsletter and subscribe, because now there's more information there that I can use later. And it just gives me opportunity for more information. Because on both sides, researcher and design, one thing we're both tasked with, and we're kind of one and the same in a sense, and many, not all, right? Not all, but many. We're kind of one and the same. What's really important is information. The more you know, the more information you have, the more insights that you have, the more perspectives that you have that can make things more valuable. That perspective means, or brings diversity, which is a game changer that I think every organization can now agree upon, especially from a revenue perspective. Those things are super important. So yeah, Google it and start subscribing. That's been a pretty valuable thing for me, because stuff pops up that I literally would not have known otherwise.
It's true, and I want to talk and kind of you touched on it before, and now we have like a little segue for it. Now I can just jump right in there. But the questioning how myopic our view may be. We are both in the United States. You are in Atlanta. I am in Dallas. And as Westerners, especially, I feel like we tend to be very Western oriented, a little myopic about the decisions that are made. We feel like the way Americans are using things is the way that it should be standard across the world. And that is just simply not the way it is. 10 years ago, Asia was totally good buying things on mobile. Not a problem. That was, something that had been in the market for a while. It was adopted very clearly. But 10 years ago in the United States, we would not have touched it. We will window shop, but when it came to making a purchase, especially a large purchase, we felt more comfortable in a vehicle of a desktop or a laptop or whatever it may be. There was just something about it. And it took us a decade to adopt that. That being said, there are still things in the UX product world that are have a higher adoption rate overseas than they do in the US. I mean, that's stuff like mobile first, of course, is something that we think about all the time, but mobile only. We're not quite there yet. We expect that if something exists on your phone, then it exists on a laptop, on a desktop, on a whatever. We're expecting it to be responsive. That is not the way the entire world is adopting things still. In areas of Asia, Africa, South America, where it's easier to get, where mobile is the primary avenue of accessing this content, they're just going mobile only. And there are areas in the United States where that is very common. And as Westerners in the United States, we just typically don't think about that. So that kind of perspective. Another thing is like super apps, where they just are consolidating like many capabilities like messaging, payment, ride hailing, food delivery, like all in one. These things are very popular in Asia to have one app that does it all. That's your all. But in the United States, we're very used to going, oh, well, I have DoorDash for that, and I have Cash App for that, and I have Messenger for that, or WhatsApp for, that kind of stuff. And when you think about it from a user experience standpoint, I'm not sure why we're using 17 apps to do something that we're just doing through our daily life. Why isn't it consolidated into super apps? Because we in the United States have not really adopted that yet. So, something to keep in mind is to question how myopic our view is. How skewed are we by saying, well, because this is what I interactive in my life, that is what the standard must be. And that is just simply not true. We are outweighed by a monetary population very much elsewhere in the world. We see it in the Middle East. We see it like the UAE. We see it in Asia. These markets are booming. The populations are booming, and they have buying power. And if you have buying power, that means that you have the loudest voice. When we all got those updates on our iOS and it all went crazy and we're all hyper colors and all this stuff, and we're like, why are they doing this? They destroyed everything. Why do we have this in Apple? They weren't doing it for us. We were not their largest market anymore. And we have to remember that as a product designer, as a UX designer, even as a researcher, right? We have to remember that we are not the only market. Um, Tying into what we're saying about our groups and newsletters, when you go in and you're researching stuff like the User Experience Professional Association, right? The UXPA, they not only will you find them for your state and your country, you will find them for other countries as well. And sometimes you will find them translated into the language that you speak. Join those groups, find out what they're talking about. They could be well ahead of a curve in a problem that you're trying to solve. And those things are important because we are a global community. We exist in a global community all the time. We're constantly working with people overseas in different time zones, and we have to build products that keep that in mind. At least have a mindset to keep that as part of the way the world is, and it will only become more open. I hope, but I think it will only become more open because our money is going everywhere all the time in a split light moment, and you follow the money.
And Andrew, here's a really, really good example of that. So speaking of newsletters, I'm a big LinkedIn user just because it's more on the professional side. They still talk a lot of politics and stuff, but for the most part, it's on a fairly professional level. And here is what we mean about the globalization and the different perspectives. So for us in the U.S., the whole generative AI is all about saving time, right? It's all about us saving time as the workers, as the people that are in the industry, versus another country. And this is not every country. This is only my observation thus far, my hypothesis thus far. In India, for example, they're not really worried about saving time for their people. They're like, what? We're going to save time so they can leave early? They're worried about efficiency, systematic efficiency, right? And even though that is something that is important on the US side, what's really important for us, we're also thinking about mental health. We're thinking about a way to balance work life balance and things like that, versus some other countries, that's not their priority. Not that they're not thinking about it, it's simply not their priority. Their priority is efficiency on a systematic level so they can make sure that their workers are working when they should and not taking breaks and things like that. And that is a really, really good example of what you're talking about, Andrew, um, on a global scale. Perspectives are different, ideologies are different, and what's most important can be quite different from our Western view.
Oh, absolutely. A user experience is a human experience. And right. And believe it or not, everybody who's listening, not everyone has the same experiences in their life that you have. And I don't know if that's going to shock everybody, but that's the truth, right? And we have to be open to that. And we can't just make these assumptions. And we're always living in some sort of cognitive bias, always. I feel that through research and through perspective, we try our best to limit that bias as much as possible. I feel the more we learn, the more that we're open, the better we are at understanding a holistic view of the world than than those who are just, well, I just, this is what I assume and I'm just going to cut my mind off. And in fact, if that's if that's your mindset, I don't, again, I'm not sure if this is for you, but if you are let's research this and let's question my thought process, and I don't want to make assumptions and I want to tackle my cognitive bias, then this is a great area for you. This is what we do every day. We have one of our activities is called the Gemba Walk. Um, and that's when you go into a place of business, and you just observe the atmosphere and you open yourself up to just observing the process, how things flow, what people do, what is the interest, and just allowing yourself to be part of the atmosphere, simply as an observer. And I think that even on a meditative level, that's a pretty good practice. I would say take some time every once in a while, just sit on a bench for 10 minutes and just be an observer in the world and just observe what people are doing. And I think that makes us feel a lot closer to people to really see what is it that they're just kind of just subconsciously doing, moving from one into the other. How do they, you know, where do they get their papers from? Where are they going to deliver this? Like, what kind of parcels are they carrying? How far do they have to walk? Like all of these things. And then it's just being curious about people, right? I think that's a big part of what we do is being curious, asking questions, and then validating our hypothesis, accepting that our thought is a hypothesis, and then validating it with research.
Hashtag be curious.
Be curious.
Andrew's hashtag on our what 10th episode.
I know. 10th
Can we
episode.
like virtual balloons? We don't have that capability, but boom, boom, boom balloons. 10th
Virtual
episode. Whoop,
balloons.
whoop. That's
um,
fantastic, right?
I know. And I did want to say that there are, as a product designer, so there's a lot of really great things out there. I do, again, going back for, um, you know, trends, right? Designers, I get it totally. There's a lot of really great things out there that talk about some of the trends in UI design. There's like new morphism, which is kind of a mix between flat design and skeuomorphism. So skeuomorphism was something that we saw a lot when kind of the iPhone first came out about 20 years ago, when we were using a lot of textures. PNGs were like the big hot file, and that's how we loaded everything. So we were able to do like a lot of kind of deep cut shadows, a lot of grains, a lot of textures. So that skeuomorphism ended up moving into more of a flat design because we were incorporating new dev tactics to have lighter websites. Now we're kind of moving into new morphism. And all of these things are really important to know as trends. But, as we say, trends do change. But they're out there. And I think it's also important to be able to speak to that because those are conversations that people are having, especially when it's a hot keyword that people want to use around the office or someone wants to bring to the table. How are we going to incorporate whatever, into our app design? One, we talk a lot about UI or UI. We talk a lot about UI, about artificial intelligence and augmented reality. That is something huge that we're seeing in a lot of product design. This is how we're communicating with others, how we are allowing communication within ourselves. We're seeing a lot of gesture-based initiatives for um, video control, for product control. But one thing that I find really fascinating, something that's coming up a lot recently, is ephemeral experience features. Ephemeral experience features. And that's really just how you can create immediate stories and videos that create an experience that are temporary. So, how do you optimize content storytelling? And again, it comes back to our need to, as a narrative, to storytelling as a product designer. Um, Very interesting topic that people are discussing right now. It's very similar to kind of like quick videos that you see on YouTube, but it's really going to be more like a Snapchat kind of thing. And content creators are really very good at pulling tens of millions of views by simply creating these very short, kind of snappy, ephemeral experiences. Being able to pull that into an application is just gives you another edge. And these are the kind of things that keeping up with UX trends, UX topics, keywords, hot topic kind of thing, is very helpful with, because your competitors are doing it, or if you're getting in very early because you're very close to the source of people who are talking about these things, then you can jump in and learn how to do these things. There's a lot of opportunity out there for people who are very good at these things to get in ahead of the curve, which just means that you have a higher competitive opportunity than others in your field. So I think so when we talk about staying close to the source in the matrix kind of way, what we really mean is if you're closest to the original conversation, um, you are not in this echo chamber. You can react to it faster than other people in your industry, and it's highly important to do that. You're not generally going to get it from just random people who are having a UI debate on Facebook, even though I'm sure that's a lot of fun to be a part of. But you will get it from people who are working in the industry, people who are um, uh, respected at the height, people who are writing, people who are doing conferences and putting out videos that are getting mass amounts of of hits. It's the those are the content creators. They're dreamers of dreams. They are the thought provoking people in the industry. That's who you need to get as close to as possible. And if they say, "Oh, I was inspired by this person or this book," then go find that person and read that book. You want to be as close to that mindset as possible, and it will give you the edge, and it'll give you a head start to start problem solving and launching from that thought process. So when we say things like "be as close," find as close, the research methods are important. This is why, not because we're going to grade you or not writing a report, is because you want to be as close and as part of the conversation as humanly possible.
And Andrew, you mentioned content creation. Talk to us a little bit about. I think it's more important than what I think. Uh, it's it seems like it's one of those skills that uh, we will all need to possess. But again, these are my thoughts. And I know that you're really into that industry. You have some eyes on it that I don't have. So I would love for you to talk to the audience about content creation in general, and if you think it's important to kind of put on our radar as far as skills to enhance and skills to develop.
I do. I do. I think it's important to me. It's still in the line of good branding or good advertising. It's a communication design, And being a content designer is, you want something, you want to create something that people will then pick up and share with other people. So even though you might have something online and there's only maybe one avenue or 8 different social media platforms to view it, then if it's interesting, if it's dynamic, or if it's thought provoking, or if it has a puppy on it, or we're more of a kitten kind of family, but don't judge me. Then you share that content because that content is interesting. It evokes a feeling. It connects with people, and it presents itself in an emotional way where then your audience member voluntarily picks up your message and moves it to another person for you. Just like any good brand does, content creation does the same thing. That's why those likes and shares are so important, because you want to multiply your effect without you having to do all of the lifting. Storytelling is important. It's important in a product. Why should I buy your energy bar? Because it was created in a forest by a bunch of wolves who raise bobcats. I don't know. That's adorable, and that's the story. And then I get this fuzzy feeling thing, and I connect with you, right? I'm emotionally connected. And then I go, oh man, I saw this. I saw this energy bar. Or actually, I tell this story. They're like, what is that for? It was for an energy bar. Like, oh, that's so cute. Then they tell their friends. They tell their kids. It multiplies. It's the classic the classic ability for branding to spread, right? The Anything that you read by any of those original kind of marketing books, branding books, anything like that, is all going to be about how do we turn this into a delivery method that other people will voluntarily share on their own. And that, as it's been here for a long time, but with content creation and creating so much of it, it is highly competitive. However, we've also have so many people who do it that it's almost become, I don't want to say it's become formulaic, but there are people who can speak to it in a formulaic language. So not so much of just being like, oh, well, artistically, I just, I think about what would be amazing. And then I lay in a sunbeam and then it comes to me and then I create it. They're like, no, this is how I do it. I've got 15 seconds or less. I'm sure it's less. And then I have to start with a hook, end with a hook. This is, that kind of thing. Um, and those are the people that I want to follow. I want to know every thought that they've got because they can speak in my language. But that's why it's so important to get out there. You're only going to nab someone's attention for a split second if you're lucky. And the way algorithms are, you may not even get that much. So how do you get what you want to the people that you want when you want them to get it, and make it in a way that they will then carry that message for you?
I
That's my
love that.
long-winded answer.
No, no, I really love that though, because what I'm hearing is it's so important to be a storyteller.
It
There's a
is.
plethora of ways to tell the story. You can do it with imagery, you can do it with words, you can do it with the PowerPoint, whatever. But the ability to tell the story and to convey your ideas to the next individual, um, is the most important thing. And so this is why this content creation has become I'm hesitant to say like the number one, skill to learn, but man, it's really getting up there, isn't it?
It is very important. I mean, you think about it from, I dare to say, sociological or anthropological, mindset, right? The practice of storytelling amongst humans in all of our history is so important. It creates kingdoms and legends and myths. We've always had this. And when we sell ourselves, whether it be to an audience or to an employer, the power of storytelling is such a part of our human existence that we connect emotionally with a stranger and tells them that you and I are similar because we can connect on these things. And that is very powerful, whether it's so, you don't kill me and take over my village, or because I can get a job. But the power of storytelling is it's so closely tied into our human experience, that it's inescapable. Connecting with another person and to on an emotional level is one of the most powerful things that you can do. And regardless of if you're creating a YouTube video or you're trying to make a resume that stands out, you are a content creator, you are a storyteller, and you are trying to connect with someone on an emotional level. And that is one of the most important things that we can do as humans. And it's really the backbone of what we're talking about all the time. And I don't think I could stress the importance of that enough. But I agree.
I think it's one of the oldest things that we've done as humans. I think about I mean, I immediately get a picture of I like the History Channel, not necessarily a history buff, but I like to know about history. And you think about like the Stone Age and the little antelopes or whatever they were carving on the rocks, because they had to tell a story to the next generation for survival or whatever the case may be. So it's our oldest form of communication and continues to be the most important. And whoever said that your art degree or your communication degree would not pay off, you should have them listen to this podcast because it is paying off.
I will have them listen because I'm shameless about sharing this out. Yeah, no, it's very true. And again, but I think, and we talk on this a lot, right? A curious mind is important to give perspective to the world. Whatever it is that you're curious about, it's about taking that, finding out about it, creating a commonality, finding that conversational language, and saying, well, how can I speak to this in the language of art history? Or can I speak to, how can we talk about product design and communication or presentations in the world, in the language of art history or in the language of whatever? This aspect is something that was what we use to tie in and to relate with each other. Um, so yeah, don't let anybody tell you that your interests are not useful. They're useful for everything because you have an interest. And I think that if you are of that mindset, if you are curious and you are hungry for that, to have a conversational discussion in many languages through many of these interests, and you are curious about it, there's no limit to the creativity, the output that you can possess, and the importance that you can have in this world. It's a very simple thing to just ask a question, and very few people take the initiative to do that. So I think that everybody who's listening to this should take that step and just be the person who asks those questions, and be curious for sure.
And as a person who always has something to say, that's me, or a question, let's not forget that technology is here to assist us. You guys have no idea how many conversations I have with ChatGPT, not just for work or specific things. It's literally like, man, I'm thinking this. Like, I have this thought, or I'm creating my strategy for the next 3 or 5 years. Man, how can I really get ahead of generative AI? Like, what does that look like? And what's the next step for the Internet of Things? And you can really start asking those questions, not saying that it's going to give you the correct answers, but it's going to give you answers that will allow for you to think in such a way that you're going to start asking yourself more questions, and that's going to get you closer to the answer. And so this technology, the chat gpts, the bings, Facebook even as Meta, whatever. All those things have been fairly valuable because it allows me to almost have another person to bounce ideas off of, uh, that wants to hear what I have to say. Because, if you're not in the industry, some of this stuff kind of goes over your head if you're not a designer, or if you're not in product design, or if you're not, a software engineer. Like, these things, people don't care. And so it's great to have a technology, aka an artificial intelligence, that can converse with you and not get tired of um, thinking with you. And it's been so valuable. And so I want to just implore you to use these technologies out here, because everything is about a mindset. And if you can get yourself in the proper mindset, the thoughts and the solutions and the ideas will come. But the hardest part, at least in my experience, is getting in the proper mindset, or in the correct mindset, for the ideas to start flowing.
I agree. I agree. I think that's a healthy parallel to be in. Um, Absolutely. And again, if for those, it's not too late to the party. AI is changing all the time. It's becoming more well-rounded, more holistic. And for those who have not jumped into the game, do it. I tell my students, I say, converse with, find a large language model that you like, whether it be ChatGPT or Gemini or Claude, and converse with it to the point that it makes your family nervous. Like, talk to it, ask, who designed you? Where do you come from? Like, what kind of questions can I ask you? Like, I have this question. How else could I ask that question? Really have this discussion. It is not a search engine. It is a large language model, and it is fascinating. It's a fascinating place to be right now. and it's rapidly growing, and it's only going to get more enriching, um, or not, but I'm sure it will be.
Or not. Dun, dun, dun.
Right. I was waiting for Kamitha to jump in there, like, or they know the
I have
conspiracy
to keep
theory on
putting my
that one.
mute button, on and off, with the goal of mitigating the, outside noises,
I think
hopefully.
that's fair. Well, all in all, I think that was a good discussion. And really being out there and being curious is what it comes down to. Being part of conversations that I think are outside of our perspective are very important. And allowing, taking the borders down in your mind, not living such a myopic world, and understanding our own biases that we hold, and tackling those down, and recognizing that we all have them, but we can do something about it. And I think understanding that as a whole is really what I think, to summarize the conversation we had today, is a really important thing, not just as a product designer or a UX researcher, but as a person as well. And it's definitely a good practice for us to reflect on. So I feel good about that. I feel good about that talk.
I agree, and I hope, you guys were able to take away some of those resources to whether it's to better skill yourself or just to network more or get more information, so feel free to rewind and, get some of those resources. But yeah, this conversation was, definitely necessary and super important.
All right. Well, as we're wrapping up, I want to thank you all for listening to another episode of My First Day in Tech. Please don't hesitate to reach out with your questions. So if you enjoyed this episode, you can listen to all our podcasts on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, YouTube Music, and YouTube. And speaking of YouTube, don't forget to hit like, subscribe, and share. And as always, we are your hosts, Andrew Riddle, and your favorite UX researcher, Kamitha Dunn. Have a good week, Kamitha.
You too. Have a good week, everyone.
Bye.